Ladies and a few gentlemen, I have a dream where women are able to stand beside our men as equals, where our contribution is valued by all, including ourselves, and where the role that we play is celebrated, revered and rejoiced, and that this is not unusual. My name is Catherine Marriott and I come from Western Australia. I've been lucky enough to work in agriculture my entire career, and I'm really blessed with the fact that I was grown up on a farm because I was aware of the opportunities that our wonderfully diverse agricultural sector has to offer. And I think that there are many people who grow up in cities who were not lucky enough to be born on farms that would be absolutely surprised and overwhelmed with the phenomenal opportunities we have in agriculture if only they were aware of it. My career in agriculture has taken me all over the world. I've been lucky enough to have lived and worked in England, in America, in Indonesia, the Philippines, India, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Malaysia, and my little journey has only just started. So I guess that's just testament to the diversity that we have within our agricultural sector, and the fact that by being involved in agriculture, you can actually work wherever it is you want in the world and have a contribution to make. I've worked for the first 10 years of my professional career as a technical consultant in the northern beef industry. The last 5 of those years was over in Southeast Asia. So I worked in Indonesia, Philippines and Malaysia as a technical consultant in the live trade. And my role involved improving animal welfare. I was involved with formulating rations, so improving the nutrition of the cattle, doing animal handling schools, developing breeding programs and working in the abattoirs. And it was one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. Working with the people on the ground in those countries, no one will ever be able to take the experience away from me, and I absolutely treasured that. I've recently founded a company called Influential Women, and Influential Women is designed to create conversations that connect urban and rural Australia by building confidence, capacity and skills in women. I think we have lots of people from urban Australia that are really interested in where their food comes from, and today is testament to that and how it's produced. But in agriculture, we use agricultural language, which sometimes people from urban Australia don't understand. So I'm really passionate about building relationships between urban and rural populations. This lunch today is about celebrating the role that women play in feeding and clothing the world, in caring for animals, in caring for the environment that we live in, and the important role that we have in contributing to local communities, not only local communities, but communities like Melbourne. I love the contribution that agriculture makes to society as a whole. We contribute far and wider than what most people would even think. We have a contribution to the hairdressing industry, to the pharmaceutical and the cosmetic industry, to the print media, to AFL. The footballs are made out of cattle hide, to the Melbourne Cup. And I love the fact that from my perspective, working in agriculture, I have the capacity to contribute to everybody's lives. In my role at the moment, I come across so many women that are absolutely confident, they're forward-thinking, they're progressive, they're dynamic, they're intelligent, and they're change agents. They're not only looking for change, but they're seeking out and they're leading that change. And I also come across women that have got the capacity to contribute, but perhaps not the confidence. So I would encourage all of you to step up, to look out and seek for people that you can mentor and bring other women along on the journey with us, because I think the power of women in a team is only going to make the entire team work much more efficiently. Today we're going to enjoy some beautifully homegrown and locally grown food and beverages provided by many of the women here in the room. The menu has been designed for us today by the fabulous Nikki Reamer, who we'll be lucky enough to hear from in a little while. We also have Chloe Lavatt and Alison McDonald in the room, so if you can wave your hands around, girls. Those two have brewed the gorgeous beers that we're lucky enough to be tasting, and unfortunately Melissa Fetke couldn't be here, but she was supplying the Pipsqueak cider. We will then have 5 dynamic and progressive women all involved in agriculture. Now some of you may look at their CVs and think, well, they're not involved in agriculture. And I would encourage you all to sort of broaden and change your paradigm shifts around agriculture, because it is no longer an industry with an old man in a red tractor. It is so much wider than that. After the panel have spoken, we'll enjoy some lunch, and then we're going to have a Q&A session where you'll have the opportunity to engage with our wonderful panellists, and then we're going to have a couple of songs by the phenomenal band Jetty Road. A little bit of housekeeping. The bathroom is just out the door and to the right. We do have a Twitter hashtag going, which is #WomenInAg, or if you wanted to tweet at RASV_Vic or at the Royal Melb Show. And also, just as a side, today is being filmed, so there'll be video of today going on the RAS website. Thank you very much to our presenting partner today, Rural Finance, and we're lucky enough to have Alexandra Gartman here in the room with us today. And to get today started, I'd now like to introduce Nolene King to welcome you all. Nolene King is she's an RASV board member, but she's also chairman of the Beef Cattle and Carcass Committee, and she runs her own dairy heifers and beef enterprise. So, Nolene.
Thank you, Maz, and I refer to Maz. A lot of you know her as that, and otherwise you can speak to her as Catherine, but a lovely welcome from you, Maz. And it's a pleasure for me to welcome all the ladies and the gentlemen in the room today. What a wonderful outlook we have onto the show, and I couldn't think of a better place to be to have a lunch to draw so many inspirational women together than the Royal Melbourne Show. Thank you very much to Rural Finance, to Alexandra Gartman for being here today. Alexandra is a board member with Rural Finance, and I just said to her before, I had the pleasure of spending some time with Rural Finance, and when Alexandra came on, I stepped off, and I know she does a wonderful job there. So thank you, Alexandra, for your support. To Nikki Reamer, I met Nikki earlier today, our menu designer. We're going to look forward to a lovely menu. Thank you very much, Nikki. It's lovely that you've come on board with this today. To all of the female food producers who have contributed to our lunch today. We've got some beautiful products that will be coming out, and I know everybody will be able to discuss the food that's coming out today, and all prepared in the kitchen here behind. To the female brewers who are involved in today's lunch, what an inspiration you are. Probably something that once upon a time was unheard of, to have female brewers. So step up, girls, it's wonderful. To the 5 panel members we're going to hear speak to us today, I look forward to hearing from each of you, and I do hope and encourage you all to step forward with your questions, because this is a great opportunity that we've been given to do this. I do hope that this will be continuing. I would hope this is an initiative of the RAS that we'll look forward to each year. Here at the RAS, we look to advance agriculture. In many ways, we have a pavilion down below which I'm proud of. The amount of young ones who are here at the show. This early part of the show we're showing sheep and goats and cattle, steers specifically, and if you come down to the pavilion you'll see a huge number of young ladies, and of course there's a balance, but it's inspirational to see that we've got young people coming through our school system, and we are fully supportive of that, and we look forward to over the whole show working with them. I can only speak for my section, but I know we've got young people here all over the showground, and this is where they get a leg up, and I look forward to encouraging them, and I would hope that anybody here in the room who has that opportunity to do so as well. The RASV is very busy in promoting fine food throughout the Victorian community. We have our Fine Food Awards, the Melbourne Wine Awards, which many of you will be aware of, the International Beer Awards, which is a more recent innovation and is gaining momentum each year. We've just recently commenced the Australian International Coffee Awards, and I didn't know, not being a coffee drinker, but the Coffee Awards were just a huge success this year. For those who are coffee people. I'm sure there's probably very good coffee around here on the showgrounds. These are premium events which the RASV are very proud to be a part of and do a wonderful job in promoting, and we are always looking to new initiatives, and maybe a luncheon like this is where we might draw out some new initiatives that we might follow through with, all in the hope of promoting Victorian food and agriculture. A newest promotion is Wine Week, something that we've just started on, and I encourage all of you to step into our Taste of Victoria Pavilion here on the showground where the Fine Food Deli is situated. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the event we have today. We're about to be served some wonderful food for you to enjoy. Please discuss it. Discuss anything that you have here, the beverages that we're about to enjoy as well. So many of you have contributed to this, and I do say to you, have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you for being part of it.
It's now my pleasure to introduce the phenomenal Alexandra Gartman, who's a Rural Finance Board member. Alexandra has had a wonderfully distinguished career and is someone who I actually personally look up to for her role and expertise in corporate governance, as well as the roles that she's played around philanthropy and rural advisory boards and councils. She's currently the CEO of the Foundation for the Rural and Regional Renewal. She's worked in leadership roles that are absolutely aplenty. Some that I'll mention is the Birchip Shopping Group. Now that's interesting. Everybody needs one of those. Birchip Cropping Group, and the CSIRO. She worked internationally in Chile and China and loves all kinds of adventure sports. In 2005, something that really kick-started Alexandra's career was she was the Equity Trustees Not-for-Profit CEO of the Year for significant innovation. So please join with me in welcoming Alexandra.
There is a really great shopping group in Birchip. We have this fantastic event just before Christmas, big shopping night, so everyone's invited. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you very much, Noeline. You did leave some very big shoes to fill on the Rural Finance Board. So I'm here representing Rural Finance Corporation, who is really, really very proud to be the presenting partner at this Women in Food and Agriculture event with the Royal Agricultural Society of Victoria, continuing what is a 25-year partnership between our two organisations. And at Rural Finance, we have a long history of supporting and enabling Victorian farmers to build vibrant businesses and to drive the growth of Victorian agriculture. We really are dedicated to the development and excellence of agriculture in Victoria, and through initiatives like this event, we're able to share the success of this industry. We believe in a bright future for Victorian agriculture because agriculture is a critical economic and social component within Australia and particularly Victoria. Now, I recently heard the statement, "Culture conquers strategy." And I'd like to applaud RASV for hosting today's lunch because you are supporting a culture of celebrating, sharing, building and changing the paddock to plate partnerships, understanding and opportunities to enable the agricultural industry in Australia and particularly in Victoria to flourish. Congratulations. At Rural Finance, we believe we live in a great state of ag, and we want to share the success of our industry with all who have a passion for agriculture and the broadest definition of agriculture, as Catherine highlighted earlier. This initiative was actually launched at the Heart of Victoria dinner hosted by RASV and Victorian Farmers Federation in June this year. And the online platform is a space for sharing success stories and improving the image of agriculture and celebrating all that we are. It promotes events, insights, and there's even a $10,000 seed fund up for grabs for innovative ideas. So please visit the website, greatstateofag.com.au, follow us on Twitter or Facebook to get the latest in ag information and events. And there's also a stand at the Livestock Pavilion. At that stand, we're featuring some farming success stories, which includes Catherine Marriott's family property. And if you wanted to speak to any of our Rural Finance staff, the ladies over here on table 1 would love to tell you about Great State of Ag and any of the other initiatives. So thank you very much for the opportunity to partner you at this particular lunch. And I'm going to hand back over to Catherine, and looking forward to a fabulous afternoon. Thanks very much.
It's now my great pleasure to introduce Nikki Reamer, who's the lady who's designed our menu for today. Nikki is regarded as one of Australia's leading chefs and is now the proud co-owner and head chef of Union Dining, which is based in Richmond in Melbourne. So if you ever get a chance, go down and have a meal there. I was speaking to Nikki and she's had an interesting career. It actually started off doing a Bachelor of Chemical Engineering, where she finally saw the light and decided to come over into the hospitality, which is where her heart absolutely lies. After heading numerous kitchens in Melbourne and also globally, Union Dining has allowed Nikki to share her incredible skills and flair for traditional European dining. So join with me in welcoming Nikki.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was it was actually funny. She said, you did chemical engineering? I did, for a little while. I didn't finish it. I did see the light. I remember telling my parents, I actually don't enjoy this. I think I want to be a chef. My dad didn't speak to me for about 3 months. We're okay now, 22 years later, I'm in the kitchen. So I just wanted to say a little bit about what I wanted to do today. And when I met with Anne and Samana, we talked about doing a menu for today. And she said, would I be able to use some female producers? And I said, absolutely, not a problem. So I have wonderful producers and suppliers for our restaurant, and 3 of which I really utilise today, and that's Judy Crow with that sensational pork. She does wonderful product. I think I've been using Judy 10 years or more. I can't even remember when I met you. So always had a wonderful relationship. And also some newer suppliers that I've gotten to know since I've had my restaurant, and that's the 2 Megans. There's Megan Attar from Seven Hills and Tallarook Goat Farm, and we've got Megan Bertram from Yarra Valley Gourmet Greenhouse. So you're going to see some delicious goat with the tagine, and also Megan does sensational fruit and mainly vegetables, I should say. Some stunning strawberries when they're around. But today you would have had those beautiful little French breakfast radishes. So for me as a chef, I guess the most important thing is that all of you who are working in agriculture supply meat. And I feel like I'm top of the food chain, and I'm the luckiest person because I get to have the fruits of all your labour. And it means so much to me to meet so many wonderful women in the industry as well. So we're a niche market in the restaurant life of female head chefs. I wish there were more of us, and I'm pushing for as many as I can. And I do love to deal with women suppliers because I must admit, I think we have a better bond, we understand each other quicker, and I want to keep that going. I want to keep that growing. So thank you very much. And I also just wanted to say a quick thank you to Philippa's Bread because they very kindly donated the bread today. So enjoy, sit back and relax, and you will have a lovely dessert from Kath Claringbold and her partner. They have Birch and Purchase. So have fun today. Thank you.
So food and land, and what does it mean to me? Simply put, it makes my heart sing. I wouldn't work in any other industry on the planet, and I am so lucky that agriculture is so diverse because it means I'll never run out of absolutely fabulous things to do. There is a spirit and pride that goes along with producing food not only for our fellow Australians, but also providing healthy food for our global population. I love the challenges and I absolutely love the opportunities that working in agriculture provides. There is never 2 days that are the same, and I am constantly learning. I have the capacity to seek out change and to lead change because the world is your oyster when you work in agriculture. I love meeting and interacting with the people that are as passionate and contributing to rural Australia as anyone else that I know, and also providing food and nourishment for our fellow friends and family. I also love meeting people who are from urban Australia who have a growing interest and passion for where their food has come from, how it is produced, and why it is produced in certain ways. The land. It supports us and it provides us with nutrition and inspiration every day. I feel so blessed to work in rural Australia, and it astounds me sometimes when people say, but how can you live out there? Like, don't you get bored? And I sort of think, my goodness, I'm so blessed to be able to appreciate the simple beauty that we have, the shapes, the colours, the seasons, the grasses, the land. If you slow down and take time to actually look around, you'll realise how absolutely blessed I am to live in rural Australia. And if you're not lucky enough to live in rural Australia, I would encourage you all to go out and have a look. There's a sense of pride that we get from producing food, while improving the environment for future generations and working with animals on a daily basis. There is nothing better than taking care of animals. And that I'm able to actually share the food that I produce with my family and friends and fellow Australians. To me, being involved in the food industry is so much more than being a farmer. Being a farmer is absolutely important, but there is so much more, and I would encourage you all to think outside the stereotypical agricultural sector. The opportunities are aplenty, and we're going to hear about them from our panellists this afternoon. I personally wouldn't be in any other industry for quids. I think it's important that we celebrate the amazing industry, and the RASV event and events like this, the Melbourne show, this lunch, the dinner last night, are fantastic events that we can use as a conduit to share our journeys together. I love absolutely sharing the gifts that I've received from living in rural Australia, and I want to make sure that we continue to celebrate with and learn from our more urban friends. I would now like to invite up the 5 panellists. So today we are lucky enough, we have got Adi Dawes-Birch, who's the CEO of the Global Foundation, Wendy Hargraves, who's a journalist and publisher, Miranda Sharp, who's the founder of the Melbourne Farmers Markets, Kirsty Albion, who's co-director of the Australian Youth Climate Coalition, and Susie Martin, who's co-principal of Welcome Swallow Angus. So if I can get all of you ladies to come up and take your place on the panel. While they're coming up, I'll start by introducing our first panellist that we're going to hear from, and that's Adi Dawes-Birch. Adi Dawes-Birch is CEO of the Global Foundation, Australia's preeminent citizens' public policy organisation, which is helping shape longer-term solutions to the great challenges facing sustainable national and international development. Adi has a strong background in international affairs, having held senior positions most recently with the Fosters Group. She has been an active advocate for increased focus on local, national and international food security issues. Adi is also an ambassador for something that is really close to my heart, which is the food rescue organisation Second Bite. So please welcome Adi.
So, on the question of what does food and land mean to me, when considering what that actually means to me, at the most basic level, the word life came to mind. And while this conjures up images of rolling green pastures, drenched in sunlight, of colourful produce stacked in formation in market, and of the newest, most fashionable restaurants in town, and also of happy families sharing nutritious meals, I came to think that's only one tiny piece of the puzzle. So today I'd like to share my insights into some of the other pieces of this picture. And so for me today, food and land means food security. This is a widely used term these days, but of which I think there is very little understanding at a macro level, and particularly in relation to how some of the challenges of food security in some parts of the world will be aligned to the opportunities in other parts. This is a term that has a very different meaning in Australia, for example, where we have no shortage of food, to a country like China, a country that has forever been preoccupied with feeding its people, which feeds just over 20% of the world's population with less than 10% of the world's arable land, of which 2/3 of that is now classified as barren or of low potential, and which has a declining rural labour force and innumerable environmental issues. I just returned yesterday from Indonesia, where I visited agricultural testing sites and farmer education sites that are run by one of the world's largest agricultural R&D companies. And there are many challenges in that country in relation to its own food future, but it's also a country that has the potential to play a valuable role in addressing the food security issues of other nations through changes in government policy, for example, in relation to its beef industry, and through improved tools and education for smallholder farmers to increase yields and deliver greater sustainability to their own agricultural practices. And again, this is just a tiny piece of the picture. We're living in a world which has an increasing population, which is facing environmental challenges, and which has a finite quantity of natural resources. And added to this is the very quickly changing demographic landscape in the Asia-Pacific region that surrounds us, one in which we have fast rising and a sizable middle class, which comes along with it all of the expectations that the middle class has in other parts of the world: higher quality food, access to goods and services, all of which leads to increased industry intervention, greater stress on the natural resources and increased wastage. And if you just look at the rate that technology is becoming redundant in the world today and the quantity of old technology that now surrounds us. So I encourage you to think about the fact that every action, every decision has amplified impacts around the world, not just here, but through local communities, through states, through nations, and through regions. And in order to avoid wars being fought over access to clean, safe food in the near future, the world requires transformational change. This needs to come from the most powerful global leaders with whom the Global Foundation is working with, but as well as needs to come from the most localised urban and regional communities around the world who play a role in the great food supply chain, and we're also working with them. The challenge is to align the vision, expectations, thinking and processes and outcomes that join up this supply chain and where it needs to be joined up in particular. And in the global food environment, there is an important and transformational role that women need to play. There are innumerable statistics that value the contribution to feeding the world. An estimated 50% of the world's food is grown by women. In Africa, this climbs up to 90%. There are innumerable statistics that value the contribution of these women, but only 1% of the arable land in the world is currently owned by women. Women are the nurturers of our families in most cultures around the world, the providers of food and consequentially nutrition to our populations. World Bank data proves that even 1 year of primary education for women farmers can increase yields by around 25% through better knowledge and better practices. And so there is great potential for women to do better in transferring knowledge, skills and capabilities. And it takes many people working together to effect great change, and will do so for all the challenges and opportunities facing the global food security picture. And the most important ingredient is collaboration. It's necessary along the way so that many people hold up the vision, many people nurture it, and many people work together to ensure that it translates into practical action that leads to a future of food security for us all, for us, for our children, and for our children's children. Thank you.
I'll be next introducing Wendy Hargraves. She's a little dynamo. I've spoken with Wendy earlier and her energy's palpable, which is fantastic. Former food editor of the Sunday Herald Sun, Wendy has been a newspaper journalist since 1986. She now publishes her own website called 5 of the Best, which is a guide to food and fun in Victoria. She also talks about food on 3AW. She has a program called Food for Thought every week, and she writes for Time Out magazine and Age Epicure. She remembers having sleepovers when she used to come and sleep with the dairy cattle in the Royal Melbourne Show with her pop. So she's absolutely got ties to rural Australia. Please welcome Wendy.
Thank you very much. I take a very different tack with my view of food and agriculture. From the very important international stage to a very, very local little stage where I grew up in Illawarra, where my grandfather had a dairy farm, very small one, pre-regulation dairy farm. And I did come to the Melbourne Show with my pop, and we slept with the dairy cows in a little bunks that they used to have. I've looked for them since. I think it's all been modernised and we can't do that sort of thing anymore, can we? But I'd come with him to the show. We'd get up in the morning and we'd brush down his girls, make sure the udders were nice and pink. And I was never, it all ended before I was old enough to actually walk the cows out myself, which I'll always regret. But it's great to see much younger kids now getting involved in the arenas and with showing animals. My other link with agriculture is my mum, my late mum, who was Australia's first AI technician who happened to be female. Now, she had an amazing run from Colac and where we were at Biak-Illawarra all the way through the Otways down to the Shipwreck Coast, back up through the Otways, Wild Dog Creek, through there. She'd take this route around there to visit all the farmers. if I was ever having a bit of a sickie from school, I wasn't able to stay home and get well. No, I'd be in the back of the car, ripping around all these farms, watching Mum in her beautiful brown overalls pull on the big plastic sleeve. In she'd go. The farmers loved her. She had a strike rate 20% higher than any of the men. I'm not exactly sure why, but I think it's because she calmed the girls down a little bit. Like, there was none of this ramming or any of that sort of stuff. She calmed them down, and, you know, it was quite an amazing thing to watch. And they loved her because she made a connection with the farmers as well. She spoke to them, she made friends with them, she found out what was important, and she delivered. My father, on the other hand, was a barber by trade, which explains why I became a journalist, because we're both absolutely voracious gossips. He was also on Radio 3AW, I'm on 3AW. He was on 3CS in Colac during the football call in Colac, which was great because he was missing a bottom tooth, so he whistled all his S's like Alan Seal. Do you remember him? Alan Seal and his whistles? So my background comes from very rural and I suppose a little bit city as well, even though that was down in Colac. And I decided very early on that I wanted to be a journalist. I could see that it was a job that would enable me to talk to anyone I wanted to, and without any fear of judgment, or except when I worked for the Herald Sun for a while there. I got a bit of judgment there for a little while. I chased ambulances, I chased politicians, I chased stories. I did that for 20 years. And I thought, this is it, this is where I'm going to be, until I had my own children, and it forced me to think about what's really important in life. And it certainly wasn't finding out what the AFL footballer's girlfriend was wearing on the Brownlow carpet, or it just brought it all back down. And I was lucky enough to be called into the editor's office, and I have to thank MasterChef for this, because MasterChef was going off its rocker about 5 or 6 years ago. Everyone was talking about food. Everyone wanted a story about food in media. And I was lucky enough to be called into an office and asked, "Can you cook?" And I said, "Well, I haven't killed my children yet." And then he said, "Do you like food?" And I said, "Well, what do you reckon, mate?" And that was my interview for becoming food editor of the Sunday Herald Sun. And the reason why, he told me later that the reason why he chose me is because I have a massive bull dust detector. I don't really enjoy listening to people who talk about the fabulous food and how it was rolled over the thighs of a Tibetan princess, and you know, it's all, let's face it, you know, we like the stories, but we want the stories to be real. And he wanted someone with a country background who wasn't going to go all fluttery and faint when she saw Matt Preston. And although he is very handsome, I'll admit that. So it was a no bull dust policy in my food section. It became the most read section in the Sunday Herald Sun within 6 months. Sadly, because of the nature of newspapers, it's all been shrunk back, and it comes out of Sydney now, which just says a lot for provenance, doesn't it? But that was my opportunity to jump, and last November I left the clutches of News Limited and Rupert Murdoch, and I set up my own business, which is called 5ofthebest.com. And it celebrates Victoria, basically. Top 5s on whatever takes my fancy. It might be top 5 reasons to visit the Shipwreck Coast, top 5 places to buy croissants in Melbourne, top 5 places to stop on your way up the Hume Highway, which is really hard to find. If anyone can help me with that. There's just nowhere to stop. And I also, it enabled me to move across into radio, which when you see me madly dashing out the door at about 1 minute to 2, I'm on 3AW and Sundays at 2 p.m. talking about food with Grubby and DD every week. Now that the footy's over, we can talk about real stuff. And I shouldn't say that, I do love my footy, but I barrack for Carlton. So I'll be racing out the door to talk on 3AW at 2 o'clock today. If I'd still been with Old Press, I wouldn't have had that opportunity either. So I get to talk about food in a wider audience, because Brisbane, Perth and Sydney come in and listen to this show as well through the national network. I have such a great time talking to food and talking about food, and it's the people that make it fun. I've gone from having to go through 5 or 6 different layers to get to an important person in sport or politics. They've all got their people holding up signs, "Go away, we won't talk to you." In food, you say, "Can I have a chat?" And I said, yeah, great, come over, have a cup of tea. In you come, would you like some dinner? And there's this passion that exudes from people working in food and agriculture that, well, you can't buy it really. And it does rub off on me. I feel much happier and more connected with my community as a result of working in this area as a journalist. I feel incredibly privileged to be invited to speak up here today. There's some amazing women in this audience who I've met, and I hope to meet some more of you later. Thank you very much.
The next panellist that I'm introducing is Miranda Sharp. Now, Miranda's been involved in the local food industry for many, many years. She's had amazing roles from chef, caterer, food writer and market stallholder herself. Her not-for-profit company has established 6 accredited farmers markets across Melbourne, which combine the opportunity for farmers to take credit for their own produce while providing a great atmosphere for local residents and putting Victorian produce in the spotlight. So please join with me in welcoming Miranda.
Thanks, Catherine, and thank you to the RASV for inviting us today. I think the fact that we're here to show says it all. This is about the pride in agriculture of regions and farmers themselves, and here we are with the most extraordinary outlook amongst the show bags, but very importantly at the big day of the year, or the big week of the year. I think we'd all agree that without farmers we don't have food. And that's been always my purpose in the work that we're doing in the farmers market sector. It's multi-levelled. On the surface, it's a beautiful Saturday morning with beautiful food and many happy stallholders. That's our goal. Beneath the surface, there are much bigger issues that we're tackling, but we've had to start somewhere. And I'm very proud to be involved at this stage of my career in something that is the most meaningful that I've ever encountered. I suppose the reason the meaning of food and the land to me now is fulfilment. I get incredible satisfaction in being amongst an enormously diverse group of people, and I must say predominantly probably women being a driving force for a business to be brave enough to come out and be not just farmers, but be everything from farmers, retailers, marketing departments, industry specialists and so on, encapsulated on market day. It is an incredible feeling of satisfaction and pride that we achieve as a group. I'm a city girl at heart and experienced, though I've been lucky enough to live in regional Victoria for 10 years in South Gippsland. It opened my eyes to regional communities, the welcome, the depth, the diversity of people, but it also consolidated to me that working with a city population that we need to tell the stories, make sure that regional Victoria, in our case, is acknowledged and celebrated for the work that goes on, but also the spoils of the produce that comes straight to the city and at risk of leaving the country areas with not the breadth and varieties of produce, let alone the ways to access them. When I left Melbourne, I'd started one farmers market at the Collingwood Children's Farm, and ironically, having left Melbourne, the other 5 have now come to fruition, which was a complex undertaking, to say the least. But it really gave me the 2 points of context for them, and I could see how regional communities are impacted on by what we do in the city. However, I knew that the opportunity is here in the city with the population and its own set of challenges. Most importantly, the education of people to understand that, and not the expectation that we can just grab food from anywhere at any time, because a modern world allows us to do that through transportation and clever farming practices that perhaps are, really stretching the natural world. And it's pulled together for me a history in the industry, which I'm very proud of as a in my former sort of life. But as a caterer, for instance, I was a tiny little dot in the sector in Melbourne, but I wanted to find a point of difference in order to be a business that people wanted to engage. I didn't want to be buying cheeses that everyone else was from someone with a clipboard and a shiny suit. I wanted to buy directly from a farmer or a cheesemaker. It got less and less possible. And then as a writer for The Age, the example was similar. Things that we used to receive were in bigger and bigger and glossier packaging with a press release, and the food was almost becoming secondary into it. And it really made me determined to stop and address where my part of the food, my input into the food sector was going. And having been lucky enough to travel broadly, to know that in other countries, a marketplace, of all its definition, is a place where communities meet, where perhaps through circumstance of local produce being what's available and for a subsistence of a country, or through a long cultural history of markets being the place where people bought and sourced their food, that we didn't have that in Melbourne. We have wonderful Victoria markets and Preston and South Melbourne and Paran and so on, but we didn't have somewhere that put the farmers back in the spotlight, and that as individuals we could come and express our appreciation, both with the full dollar and the simple note of thanks over the trestle table, as the reality is. So it's been a fantastic 12 years now in the farmers market sector locally. We are, I hope, a growing and important part of local produce. We've got a long way to go. We're scratching the surface at the moment with who we are, but there are much bigger issues in food security, in the access of food for everyone, whatever your income, whatever your circumstances. So my goal is to see a growth in the number of markets for people to access, both as consumers but most importantly to sell through, for young people to find that there are different ways to consider a life in agriculture, that they can, and importantly that they take the credit for themselves, but also for the industry, that we, through the establishment of the Victorian Farmers Market Association and our accreditation program, for instance, that we have a credibility. We know who we are to be trusted, we are a part of a very proud 5% of the fresh food sector. I gather that's the statistic. Doesn't sound very much, but we're a very determined bunch, and I hope the future is very strong through probably sheer hard work and determination from a lot of women. Thank you very much, and enjoy the lunch.
Our next speaker is Kirsty Albion. Kirsty is one of the Australian Youth Climate Coalition national co-directors and has been part of the team for over 5 years. She's passionate about empowering young people on the issue of climate change and has run training days for thousands of young people. In 2010, Kirsty was awarded the Young Tasmanian of the Year, and in 2013, with her business partner, Lucy Mann, was awarded Young Environmentalist of the Year. So please join me in welcoming Kirsty.
Great. Thank you very much, and it's such a pleasure to be here with everyone today. It's an incredible bunch of women here on stage and in the audience, so I'm really lucky to be here. I guess I've got a bit of a different take on food and land. Like you said, my background is in climate change, so I'm one of the national directors at the Australian Youth Climate Coalition, And our mission is huge and audacious, but it's to build a generation-wide movement to solve the climate crisis before it's too late. And the reason we work with young people is because it's our generation that will inherit the decisions that are made today by business leaders and our government, but very rarely are young people in the room. So we work hard to inspire and educate and empower young people in schools and universities and regional towns and suburbs all across Australia to put pressure on our business leaders and our government to create the decisions that we need for our future. I don't need to tell you how important climate is for our land and our food. All of us working here know that climate and land are just inextricably linked. And in Australia, with just 1 degree of warming, we're already seeing the impacts of climate change on our land and our food security. We just went through the hottest summer on record, where 123 records of heat and rainfall were broken, with the hottest ever day. We went through the warmest winter on record just now, the hottest September, and the earliest ever bushfire season, with 50 bushfires burning in New South Wales a fortnight ago. Australia is a country of extreme weather, but with climate change, those extremes get so much worse, whether it's bushfires or droughts or flooding or cyclones. Climate change is changing our land and making growing food so much harder. But it's not just in Australia, it's happening all over the world. And I just want to share one quick story. We've got some volunteers over in Nepal at the moment who are working with the Himalayan version of us, young people who are passionate about climate change. And they've walked them up to Everest Base Camp, and as they were walking, they said they could literally see the glaciers melting in front of their eyes. And that's incredibly sad to think of these huge swathes of rock which were once ice. But the most devastating part of this story is that the glaciers in the Himalayas are the lifeblood of the Ganges. How you say it? Yeah, through India and through China. They feed and give water to people all across Southeast Asia and Bangladesh. And if we let that ice melt, there's billions of people without access to adequate food and water. So that's why young people across Australia are getting so passionate about climate change, because of social justice and because it's our future. And I just wanted to share with you some of the stories of what young people are doing around Australia to make a difference on this. And I guess the good news is that although climate change is happening, and it has huge impacts if we don't stop it, people are the ones who are causing this problem. And we have all the solutions we need to make that transformation. For the last 200 years, people have been burning fossil fuels like coal and gas and renewables, coal and gas and oil, and putting carbon dioxide in the air and trapping heat and making more extreme weather. But we have the solutions in renewable energy to transform our economy away from fossil fuels. We have the potential to change Australia's economy to 100% renewables in just 10 years. And that transformation is happening all around the world. In last year, more money was invested in renewable energy than in fossil fuels. Places like China have now put a cap on their coal imports. And Obama came out a few months ago and said the age of coal is over. And there's no more important place to act on this than in Australia, because Australia is the single biggest exporter of coal in the world. We are the third biggest exporter of gas, with plans to massively expand that through coal seam gas. We have plans to double or triple Australia's coal exports in the next few years and ship it out of 6 new coal ports on the Great Barrier Reef. Australia is contributing a huge percentage of the world's coal and gas, yet we're the sunniest and one of the windiest countries on Earth. We have huge potential, as you know, to transform Australia to renewable energy. And that transformation is already starting to happen. A few weeks ago, we hit 1 million homes being powered by solar panels in Australia. And we've seen places like South Australia have already getting 30% of their energy from renewable energy. So Australia is a really important place for us to be making this change. I just want to share a couple of stories of what young people are doing to make that happen. One of them is in the town of Port Augusta. Who's been to Port Augusta? Yeah, Port Augusta is like 300 kilometres north of Adelaide. Pretty much this town that centres around these 2 ageing coal-fired power stations. Because there's so much renewable energy in South Australia, they're basically shutting down. These coal stations are only operating for 6 months a year, and they're the lifeblood of this town. It's where all the jobs are. And these coal stations are only a kilometre out of town, so when the wind blows a certain way, the town is covered in coal dust, and there's huge respiratory disease and twice the cancer rates of anywhere in Australia. But this town had a vision for renewable energy and to replace their coal stations with solar thermal. So a couple of young people from our organisation moved up to Port Augusta and worked with the local community to hold a community vote. And more people voted than in the council elections. A third of the community turned out and 99% voted for solar and not gas or coal for their town. And then when young people heard about this, we organised young people from all over Australia to walk those votes, the 328 kilometres from Port Augusta to Adelaide. When we put out the call, 100 young people signed up and walked for 2 weeks to get that message in the national spotlight. And on the way, the South Australian Energy Minister and the Federal Environment Ministers came out to meet with us and learn about what the potential was for solar thermal in Port Augusta, and now they've started a state review into whether or not it's possible. So that's just one story of what's happening, but there's so many more. Young people working with farmers to lock their gates against coal seam gas, young people working with communities on the Great Barrier Reef to stop the coal export expansion. And this change needs to happen in local communities right out to national. So I ask you to join us in rapidly changing Australia away from coal and gas and protecting our future. Thank you so much.
It's now my pleasure to introduce our final panel speaker, Susie Martin. I've known Susie for quite a while and I absolutely love her cows. She's got some of the most beautiful cows in Australia. But Susie actually grew up in the city. She married a farmer 21 years ago, and in her past life, she had an established career as a merchandise and marketing manager for a national retail chain responsible for several house design labels. Susie now, she saw the light and came back to rural Australia. And her husband Jim operate an Angus seed stock business on their property Ilalangi, 20 kilometres southeast of Benalla, which is actually my hometown where I grew up. She established in 1994, Welcome Swallow Angus now runs over 450 registered breeders, including a small registered Charolais stud. Susie also plays a very, very large role in local community leadership within the Benalla community. So please join me in welcoming Susie.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I must say I'm very humbled and honoured to be part of this panel today of these extraordinary women. And it's wonderful to see a room full of women so engaged with agriculture at whatever level. So I thank you. What the land and food means to me, boy, has this created some conversation in our household. It's been a wonderful exercise. In a word, it actually means everything. It obviously is our livelihood, it's our passion, and it's our life. And I'm sure that's the same for many in the room. I love the land and the business of beef production. We've thought a lot about why. Why do we love it? And I think the best explanation that we came to around the kitchen table, which is where all the good conversations occur, is that it creates such strong connections. For me, it connects me to the past, it connects me to the present, and it connects me to the future. As was alluded to before, I've not always been a country girl. I actually grew up in the city. But my dad, however, was destined to be a farmer until his time as a POW in Java during World War II changed his fate. So living on the land connects me to my family's past. Dad's retail career saw our family move around Australia with many road trips and lots of time for stories. Many of them stories of his childhood growing up on the Riverina. On the land, as they used to say. These stories resonated and I cherish them still. One of my favourites I'd like to share with you now, if I can. Competing with the whatever it is going on out there. Actually, this is probably quite appropriate as I'm seeing what's going on. This was a story of a pet cockatoo called Cocky. How original. Cocky had a talent to wreak havoc if he escaped from his cage, particularly if they were droving. Cocky loved nothing more than flying over the large mob of cattle, calling out instructions and whistling the dogs, which sent the cattle in completely the wrong direction. Just think about that for a moment. Can you imagine the chaos? Can you imagine the comedy and the frustration? Cocky was lucky he didn't live in America and that stockmen don't carry guns. He finally came to a sad end when found dying at the foot of a tree, having eaten its forbidden fruit. Once again, he had escaped his cage. There was Dad with his brothers and sisters, all standing around the tree crying, as a bird lay dying. And the bird himself, Cocky himself, was saying, "Poor Cocky, poor Cocky." Living on the land connects me to our history. I'm constantly reminded of those who've gone before and the hard work and sacrifice they had to put in to get us to where we are today. Michael Savage, who was the first Labor Prime Minister of New Zealand, unbelievably, was actually raised in a cottage on our farm in the 1870s. The youngest of 8 children, these were times of extreme hardship. The lessons he learned from his upbringing helped him to become a great and much loved leader, revered to this day. Add to that the ghosts of railways, pubs and schools, and of course the all-encompassing family folklore, living in a homestead that's been in the family for a couple of generations, and history is indeed all around us. Living on the land connects me to the present. Who can tell where love takes you? I feel so privileged to have been able to work on my life's project with my husband Jim. Most of the time, that is. Maybe not in the yards where things can get more than a little testy. The farm is also a great conduit for us to stay connected to family and friends. Like many who live on a family farm, in a family homestead, Jim and I, in effect, are the custodians of a family museum of memories and a theme park for any city child under the age of 16. Whilst this brings much joy, it can pose at times some interesting challenges. In the last year, we've had over 150 people to stay. Family, friends, advisors, AI technicians, vet students on work experience, cattle breeders from interstate and overseas. The quiet country life? I don't think so, but Jim and I wouldn't have it any other way. Life on the land connects me to the community. I became a local councillor in 2008, something I, or anyone who knew me, would never have imagined. The motivation was the radical push by a previous council to shift the rate burden onto farmland by imposing a rate increase of a massive 25% a year every year for 5 years, whilst keeping rate increases in town to as low as 1 to 2%. The fact that a council could seek to do this, or even contemplate it, in the middle of a drought really highlighted to Jim and I the connect in Benalla between the town and its rural surrounds, a shared experience with much of regional Australia. And I must say that the work that Miranda and others are doing with the farmers markets is doing so much good work in terms of trying to get rid of that disconnect. Jim and I realised that if you don't like what's happening, you've just got to get involved. You can't always rely on someone else doing it for you. In the 5 years since I've become a councillor, the shift of the rate burden has stopped, and I'd like to think there is a lot more respect and understanding within council and the community for those who live outside town. Connecting people between our town and the outlying surrounding areas is my main body of work. Being a councillor has also been, I must say, a two-way street. It's been a steep learning curve with its share of challenges. The most valuable lesson is the lesson I've learned about the amazing role of volunteers in our small rural communities, and I suspect in our big metropolitan ones as well. I always knew they were important, but I didn't appreciate just how important. How they give their time freely and are vital if you are to have a strong, cohesive community. They are, in effect, the glue of our small communities. Just for an example, in Benalla, with a population of just 15,000, volunteers deliver over 13,000 meals per year via Meals on Wheels. There are nearly 5,000 volunteer hours involved in transporting people to medical appointments in Melbourne, Albury and Shepparton, who otherwise would not be able to get there. Volunteers man our beautiful Benalla Art Gallery. If you haven't been there, you must. They also help maintain our beautiful, magnificent botanical gardens. Again, if you haven't seen them, you should. And also they maintain and manage the footy clubs and grounds in all the small towns and in Benalla itself, netball clubs and courts, and often the roadsides in our small towns, not to mention our army of SES and CFA volunteers. This list just goes on and on. The power of these volunteers could be illustrated by a recent event in Swanpool, a township of 40, where we had, the surrounding area has a population of about 600. We had 80 volunteers come together to organise an exhibition of the Bald Archie. Now, the Bald Archie, for those that don't know it, is an exhibition that tours Australia, which is a complete send-up of the Archibald. It's very cheeky, a lot of fun, and there is actually some really good art in it. So these 80 volunteers came together and they manned the Swanpool Hall, which is also the home of the famous Swanpool Cinema, which ran for 16 days, 1,700 hours of volunteer work involved, 1,500 meals, 3,500 visitors, and they raised a staggering $16,000 for the community groups involved. So I think that, to me, is an inspiration for all of us. It's all about getting engaged. So the fact that living on the land connects me to the natural environment is probably obvious. Seriously though, every decision we make on the farm is about how we can make it better. Better soil, better grass, better stock, better handling techniques, better everything. The pursuit of quality beef is a personal and professional passion for Jim and I. Our cattle business allows me to connect to the farming community. Firstly, through our involvement in several farm groups, where a progressive group of farmers get together, meet, exchange ideas, and bring in experts to work together on how to do things better. Our cattle business is all about marketing and selling genetics. Angus breeders are among the most progressive and market-focused, with the backing of some great science. We're constantly learning from our friends in the seed stock business as well as from clients. And we've been fortunate enough in the pursuit of the best genetics, we've also travelled regularly to the US and New Zealand and made many connections there. Everyone we deal with, and this is common for all of us, has a family behind them. But the big difference is in the country, you usually get to know the whole family. Through the footy, through the schools, through the council or through friends. The farming community is a strong, supportive community with great strength and resilience, which is just as well because it needs to be. Finally, living on the land connects me to the future because everything we do is aimed at trying to make the future better. So as you can see, living on the land and being involved in food production connects me in so many ways. Being connected means I'm involved, I'm committed, I'm supported at so many levels by so many other people doing the same thing. It really is what makes life relevant and worthwhile for Jim and I and gives us our sense of belonging. Thank you.
If I could now invite all of the panellists back up onto the stage, and it's now your opportunity to ask some questions of the panellists. Now, we will be filming this session, so if you're going to ask a question, can you please just wait until a microphone comes to you, and then if you could state your name and where you're from, and then briefly ask your question, because we have 10 minutes for the panellists to give you as much information as they possibly can. So who would like to start with a question? Pip Courtney from ABC Landline, saddle up, thank you. Have we got a microphone coming?
I'd like to ask a question about farmers markets. Do you think that there's a risk that farmers markets will lose their cachet and their prestige if people go along and instead of meeting the farmer who grew the beans or raised the lamb, they're actually dealing with someone who's gone to the markets and turned up with about 25 different things. I'm from Brisbane, so I'm just talking about my experience, so not talking about your event at all. That seems to be a trend that I'm seeing, and it seems to be losing its flavour. And I'm sort of worried that the success of them and the need for people to say, you have to be here 12 months of the year or you can't have a spot. I mean, food is seasonal. Farmers markets, if they're going to promote that, then maybe they have to accept that for 3 months that person won't be there. But I just know in Queensland we're seeing almost like a middleman, a grocer turning up who's been to the local markets, turned up with stuff he couldn't possibly have grown all himself, and it's not cheaper and it's not better, and consumers aren't having a conversation with a farmer.
It's on? Oh, yes. Well, what a fabulous question. Thank you very much. If that were the case in Victoria, I would be very, very worried. The point of our accreditation program is absolutely designed to ensure that that doesn't happen. It's not a simple solution, because it relies on more farmers wanting to sell direct, whichever way they choose to do it, farmers markets only being one part of the equation. But we very strictly control that. We welcome, that is the dilution of the stallholder being the grower or maker. We absolutely welcome seasonality. We do not expect. We have endless. It's why we're working so hard in the sector, is because we have people coming and going from week to week, not to mention season to season, all the time, coming, going, and it's a vital part of the education to the public that is the case. So suck it up. This is agriculture. And I sincerely hope we never lose it, and I, for one, will be working as hard as ever to ensure that doesn't happen. But look for an accredited farmers market, and you will ensure that those are the standards that are in place. Thanks, Pip.
Wonderful. Who would like to ask the second question? Yes, Alexandra? Can we get a mic over to Alexandra here, please?
Mic coming. Thank you. I was really inspired by Kirsty and her passion for engaging people in the climate and futures discussion. And I just wanted to ask, what are the ways that you see that regional and rural communities can actually drive change from within and across Australia?
Thank you so much. I think regional and rural communities are such an important part of the puzzle in transitioning Australia from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And when I talked about farmers locking the gates against coal seam gas, I saw lots of hands go in the air. And I think that's just one piece of the puzzle. It's so important that we're not using our productive farmland and turning it to be damaged by fossil fuel projects like coal and gas projects, but instead having regional communities standing up and looking for renewable energy solutions. So whether that's community wind farms or big solar projects in your community, or helping the school go solar, or reducing local emissions. There's also a lot to do in transforming our land to actually store carbon. So the carbon farming initiative and planting trees on properties and that sort of thing is so important as well.
Wonderful. Yes, Matilda?
Thank you. Matilda Aby with the Weekly Times. This is for anyone on the panel. Small farmers do a pretty good job of branding and leveraging their branding of what they produce. How do we do that for large-scale farming for sometimes what is a generic product?
Good question.
Yeah, I'll have a go. Yeah, have a go. And hi, Matilda. We used to work together at News Limited. I actually think there's a story in everything, and it's actually up to the larger farmers to find that story. Someone must have started it. There must be a nugget in there somewhere. And it's just a matter of drilling down. And if you can find what your story is, and it's interesting enough, we in the media will run it, and run it with relish. And it's a marketer's dream as well, because we've all seen how people like Lisette from the beautiful Warialda Belted Galloways, a family business that is now so well known nationally for their product, because they've got this wonderful family story to tell. But it happens in the bigger, it has to happen in the bigger companies as well. It might be the people that work there, it might be the person who started it, it might be the youth that are coming up and working with organisations like your own to create a much greener and sustainable future for the company. You just have to think outside the box.
Okay, Susie?
Well, I'd just like to add to that. I think it's coming out of the comfort zone of being behind the farm gate and going beyond it. And the challenge is to stop thinking price taker mentality and become a price maker.
And I'm very confident with what I've seen of the younger generation and the way they've impacted and how the new ways of communicating, that we're going to see that happen with the next generation.
Fantastic.
Can I add also that rather than waiting for a crisis to happen when industry goes public, let's be on the front foot and be positive, like the stone fruit growers of the Goulburn Valley. You know, let's get on board and all eat stone fruit this summer. And you know, the public needs to know about it, you know, before it's in crisis, and then we can all play a part in finding ways to help.
All happy? Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions. Yes? Just wait for the microphone. Sorry, sweet.
I just wondering what women farmers feel about new technologies, biotechnology, such as GM crops and cloning of animals, and you know, are they concerned about these developments? And I suppose the concern too with free trade agreements with, for instance, the United States. It's, I think, in the pipeline, how if Australia signs up to these, how we will basically lose many rights over our regulation of these technologies, you know. Yes, I just wonder, you know, what awareness there is and what concern there is out there. Because as a consumer, I'm certainly concerned. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Adi.
Thank you for your question. A lot of the conversation that I'm hearing at the moment, particularly around GM crops and you know, other technological intervention into farming, is that there is still, I think, a great deal of caution and unknown, even at what you would call the big end of town. I think what has been emerging most recently is a real understanding that the demand for food on the world is going to be so great so quickly that there needs to be a very valid role for technology to play in actually delivering food to market, but bearing in mind that it also needs to be safe. And I don't think that there is yet a clear definition of safe, I must say. It will vary depending on who you talk to. I think in terms of the international trading environment and free trade agreements per se, the thing that I would urge in relation to those is to ensure that peak industry bodies that are there to represent the agriculture industry, there to represent farmers and there to represent food, are actually having a very active voice in those, because quite often the negotiation of those agreements will come down to many underlying factors that have nothing to do with food at all. It'll be a political trade-off, and they're not easy to achieve. And so what you'll find is it does take so long for those negotiations to go through the process that they may well start with one government but end up with another whose priorities and policies are very different.
Wonderful, thank you.
Just on the cloning of the animals,
yep.
I think that's an issue that you don't hear discussed anywhere near as it was. And I think the simple reality of that is just following through logic. Evolution is all about selecting the strong and the better, fitter animals, and cloning is just standing still.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, ladies. You're answering these questions very well. I'm very impressed. We've got time for 2 more questions. So, yes, the lady up the back. If we could grab a microphone. There we go.
Thank you. Carol Knert from King Valley Walnuts up near Benalla. Firstly, I'd like to thank the panel for your very inspiring addresses today. The question I have is, where does the Victorian government play a role in agriculture these days? As a walnut grower and a horticulturalist, we've seen the decline in extension officers and in any support, particularly in the nut industry. And I'm wondering what message you would give to the Victorian government to come on board to assist industry.
You know, it's a good question when everyone just goes, not me.
Everyone wants to grab the mic. I would hope that the Victorian government is fair about their support for agriculture, whoever the industry is, that it recognises the contribution that we all play, and we need to get through departments and bureaucrats to the decision makers and the people who not just hold the purse strings, but really are making the direction and supporting the possibilities that might be outside the realms of conventional means.
I'd also like to add, not as from a farmer's perspective, but clearly there's not going to be the cash handout mentality of perhaps governments past, and you've got to basically let go of that completely and think outside the square once again, and think of ways that you are doing it differently from everybody else, and make it a research and development thing where you go to the government and say, hey, we're doing this better than anybody can possibly do. If you give us a bit of a cash injection in the form of a grant, imagine what we might be able to do with growth. So it's actually going to them. I had an editor who would never listen unless you went to him with an answer. He didn't want to hear the problems, he wants to hear the answers, and it's relevant in agriculture as much as it is in newsrooms.
Wonderful. Susie, just quickly, and then we'll wind up.
I think the most vital role for government to play is in R&D, and we all know that's receded, and I think we need to take the examples that we've heard about how to get together as growers of whatever we grow and feeding that information back to the government in a way that they'll listen.
Alrighty, so we've come to the finishing end of what I would say is one of the most enjoyable afternoons that I've ever had. I think the RASV have done such a phenomenal job with the help of Rural Finance in providing us with a platform where conversations can happen and where we can genuinely celebrate what rural Australia has to offer and share it with urban Australia. And I think it's really important that it's a two-way conversation that needs to be had. I'd just like to give a brief reminder for the waiver forms, which will be with Samana at the back if you did ask a question, just so that they can pop you on the videos. So I'd like to thank RASV and Nolene King for presenting and putting on this event, to Rural Finance and Alexandra Gartman for sharing with us. For all of our panellists, I think that you guys provided such a depth and was a real buzz to have you all here as part of the day. To the producers who produced the delicious food that we were able to eat. There's another round of applause coming. To beautiful Nikki Reamer, thank you so much for putting so much love into creating the dishes that we had today. So that was wonderful. And of course, days like this are not possible without all of you. So thank you very, very much. Drive safely home. Enjoy the rest of the show, and I'll catch up with you next year.